My pleasure to introduce Andrea Horwath. This is what I've learned, this is what I have come to learn about Andrea Horwath. She's a strong listener. She hasn't lost that skill, and she cares tremendously about policy implementation and what it means. Perhaps this was reinforced by her time on Hamilton City Council. We know that that's where the rubber hits the road. She does too. Please join me in welcoming the leader of the NDP, Andrea Horwath.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour. Thank you very much to President Dolan and the entire AMO Board of Directors for the invitation to be here. I think it's important to start by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. And I also think it's important to begin by thanking all of you for the service that you give to our communities and to our province. It's great to be back at AMO, seeing so many faces, so many familiar faces, so many friends, and to hear from you, the leaders in our communities, about the challenges that you face and the urgent need for a better partner in the next provincial government. I love Ontario. This is an incredible province. Our communities have a great deal of potential. Many of them are thriving. Families want to raise their kids here. New Canadians want to live here. And young people want to look forward to great opportunities to build an incredible future right here in Ontario. Our province holds so much promise for so many people. And yet, Ontario's at a tipping point today. Municipalities are facing immense pressure to deliver public services and maintain infrastructure as costs increase. I was a city councillor in Hamilton, as Lynn mentioned, back when things hadn't yet turned the corner in my fair city. I know what it feels like. I know the struggle of doing your very best to meet the needs of your communities when, frankly, you're not getting the investment you need from the province. People feel the impact. The services that families count on are getting squeezed. Schools are being ripped out of our communities, forcing young children to ride the bus for hours just to get to school. Wait lists for social housing are growing, and a lot of families and seniors are struggling to find homes that they can afford. Young parents trying to find quality childcare for their kids. Yet many of our communities have been forced to close public childcare spaces. And of course, the need is only growing for significant infrastructure investment in your municipalities. You know, as I travel across the province, I hear the same thing over and over. And I have to say, as I attend yet another AMO conference and hear many of the same concerns and requests repeated year after year, with virtually no progress being made on dozens of fronts, I firmly believe that if we do not make big changes soon, the next generation simply won't have the same opportunities as we did to build a great future right here in Ontario. Il est grand temps que les choses changent. It is time for change. That's why I'm not a supporter of downloading costs and unfunded responsibilities onto municipalities. And in fact, that's why the policies and commitments that I've already announced, that I've announced thus far, actually upload costs to the province. They shift the burden to where it belongs and make critical services a responsibility that we share. I'm proud that New Democrats have already committed to help municipalities by funding the 1/3 provincial share of social housing repairs. Because no family in Ontario should lose their home simply because the province won't do its job and fund social housing properly. We are committed to making real contributions to protect affordable, quality municipal childcare spaces, which so many parents need for their young families. And New Democrats are committed to reversing cuts to transit operations funding and restoring the 50% provincial funding for transit operating costs for municipalities. And you know, we've been listening to the townships and the small rural communities, many with growing pressures and shrinking tax bases that have been virtually abandoned by the province. We're determined to form a government and actually start addressing the concerns that you have been raising year over year at this forum. Bottom line, AMO delegates, in less than a year, I want to form a government that works with you, that invests in the services that our communities need, and that invests in Ontario, all of Ontario, and in our province's future, your community's future. I believe that good leadership is about saying what you'll do and then doing what you promised. You do that as municipal leaders, and you have a right to expect a provincial government will do that for you too. One of the most important promises that I can make is that I will listen to you and act. You know, more than 200 municipalities stood up against the sell-off of Hydro One. But the current government didn't listen. They went ahead and sold it off anyways. That's unacceptable. I want you to know that New Democrats will bring Hydro One back into public hands so that we can regain control over our hydro bills. We will listen to you, and we will take action to lower hydro costs by at least 30% for all Ontarians. Electricity is not a luxury, and it should not be priced like one. You know, unlike the other parties, we actually have a hydro plan that sets out how we'll get costs down and keep them down. With our plan, rural families and businesses will pay the same delivery costs as urban customers. We will end mandatory time of use pricing so families can actually cook dinner at dinner time and not be punished for it. And we'll end the ridiculous practice of paying for electricity that we just don't need. En Ontario, nous avons besoin de tarifs d'électricité plus bas. Et nous avons un plan pour ce faire. New Democrats are ready to step up and be the trustworthy partner that municipalities need. You know, I think we share the same priority, putting people and families first, ensuring that no matter which corner of our great province you live in, large or small, rural or urban, township or city, you have access to opportunity, to great schools, and to excellent health care. That's why New Democrats are also committed to taking action to fix our public health care system. We will stop the cuts in our hospitals, which are hurting patients and families from North Bay to Wallaceburg to Kingston, and especially hurting our seniors. And I want to talk for a minute about the care that our seniors deserve. AMO has done great work, and it's obvious that this is a priority for you. Aging in place, building age-friendly communities, trying your utmost to ensure that seniors on fixed incomes are able to afford not only their hydro bills, but their property taxes as well, and offering high-quality, safe, long-term care to our loved ones. I have a parent in long-term care. Many people in this room have loved ones in long-term care. This is an issue that is extremely dear to me, and I'm sure dear to many of you. And it's an issue that I want to tackle, that I think needs to be tackled without any more delay. And that's why New Democrats are committed to broadening the scope of the public inquiry into long-term care to address the real problems in seniors' care across this province. I'm talking about the lack of funding, the lack of beds, the huge wait lists for our aging parents who need care. Working with you to fix long-term care and give seniors the care they deserve is a top priority for me. And I know it's a priority that's shared by so many daughters and sons, husbands and wives, family caregivers and family friends right across the province. Government's supposed to put the priorities of people first, and that's exactly what we'll do. After hearing from so many of you and the people in your communities, I'm also incredibly proud to tell you today that I am committed to building this province's first universal pharmacare program. This is a prescription drug plan that covers everyone, regardless of age or job status or income. I've listened. Over the past 2 years, resolutions calling for universal pharmacare have been passed by many municipalities, from Hamilton to Brantford to Peel Region to County of Peterborough, Town of Marathon, the list goes on. Universal pharmacare will mean lower costs, less worry, and better health for all Ontario families. And this isn't just the right thing to do. It's also going to ease pressure on municipalities. Because under our plan, we estimate that universal pharmacare will help to save private payers, including businesses and your municipalities, over $800 million a year through public drug coverage. Friends, an NDP government will be the partner that takes the pressure off, that shoulders its fair share, that says what it will do and keeps its promises to you. I don't think a conservative cut and privatize and download approach is the way to go. La privatisation et les coupures budgétaires n'aideront pas nos communautés. And I think it's time to make new investments in municipalities, including significant new funding for housing and childcare and transit. It's time to make hydro public again and to lower hydro bills by at least 30%. It's time to take real action to fix public health care, to fix the crisis in seniors' care, to build an age-friendly province, and to build the universal pharmacare program that families need. New Democrats are running to form a new government in this province, to be the partner that you need, and to work with you to build a prosperous future that we all know is possible. Our province is an incredible place to live. Together, let's make it even better for all of us and all of our constituents. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Merci beaucoup. Miigwech, and now let's get to the questions.
You can sit in the far seat.
Thanks, Richard.
As with the Premier, I wanted to point out to her that folks have come from a long way to hear answers and about what your position is. And hopefully we can get to some of those answers.
Absolutely.
Okay. And sorry, if I've missed something, I don't think I have, but you know that AMO came out with a policy yesterday calling for a 1% increase in HST. And it would be the earmark for infrastructure only. What's your position on that?
Well, I mean, I have to say that I am very sympathetic to where AMO stands in terms of the concern over lack of support from the provincial government. I mean, Many municipalities are still dealing with the $3 billion of downloading that came with the Conservative decision over 2 decades ago now. And that's something people still struggle with at the municipal level. I know that it's hurting. I know that people are still paying for transit operations and the cost of provincial highways within their municipal boundaries. And I mean, there's a number of things, land ambulance. There's so many pieces that are still on the municipal tax base that don't belong there. That's why we have made some commitments around some of these pieces, and while you'll be hearing more from us about that. But I can say that we've considered the 1% tax, and look, we know that folks out there are struggling. People are having a hard time making the bills. Life is more and more unaffordable each and every day in this province, and depending on where you live, it's even more difficult. So we've decided to start with the programs that we've mentioned to try to take the pressure off. And we don't believe that it's time at all to put a new burden on everyday people with the 1%. So I know that's disappointing for folks, but one of the other things that AMO said is if you're not going to commit to the 1%, at least tell us what you are going to do. And that's why I focused, Richard, a lot of my remarks on some of the policy pieces that we've already committed to help reduce the pressure on municipal budgets.
Thank you. Well, policy pieces. Is that going to help people with their property taxes? The policy that you're putting forward, is that going to reduce taxes for people with their homes? Or are they going to see taxes raised as much as 8% every year for the next 10 years?
Well, this is exactly why we're trying to take pressure off the operating budgets of municipalities. So by uploading the cost of transit, for example, it's going to cost the provincial treasury a great deal of money, but what it does is it creates room in the municipal budget to either reduce taxes or to provide services that would have been paid for through a tax increase, for example. The same with the pharmacare plan. I mean, it's going to have a significant impact on the operating budgets because the municipalities are not going to have to pay the employer contributions anymore for massive amounts of drugs.
You know, we're talking billions of dollars here. We're not talking about chump change.
No, and when
we're talking about
same.
you know, almost $5 billion gap.
Yeah.
And all the things you're saying is going to bridge that gap.
We haven't made all of our announcements at this point, but certainly we're doing.
Well, you know the election's on June 8, right?
Yeah, I do. And you know there's a platform to come still too, right?
Well, okay. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. What is that platform?
Well, you've been around the block long enough to know that I'm not about to announce our platform at this point.
So, but it was that platform. Is that platform that this mystery platform going to answer all the questions that these folks out there have in terms of trying to make up the difference so they can provide, you know, better roads, facilities for sports, all the things that a municipality does?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think what's important to recognize is that I've sat around the municipal table. I know how hard it is. I know how hard it is to prioritize. I know how hard it is to acknowledge that, you know, you're going to have to close the arena. I mean, I talked to some folks yesterday that talked exactly about that, having to choose to close an arena in a small community because they simply couldn't afford to pay the electricity bills anymore. So, I mean, when we talk about things like getting electricity costs down, when we talk about picking up the cost of transit, when we talk about making sure that we're there as a partner to pay for things like childcare and social housing repair costs, these are all things that reduce the fiscal burden on municipalities. And as I said, I mean, we have heard a lot from particularly smaller communities who are very frustrated with some of the programs that are actually reducing the amount of supports that they've received over the years in terms of the partnership fund. We've talked to municipalities who are devastated by the fact that they're not getting approved for the infrastructure funding applications that they put in, even though it costs them money from their operating budget to actually put the application together. They don't get approved, and then they're not told why. They're not given any help or assistance as to how they can change that application and maybe be successful next time around. So there's lots of places where improvement can be made, and I think the frustrating thing, as I said in my remarks, is that these are not new stories. These are the same stories that we hear year over year.
Well, they're not new stories. I mean, I've been writing about the problems that municipalities have had for decades now, and it never seems to change.
14 and a half years with the same government, not much change has happened when it
Well,
comes to
believe me,
municipalities.
the NDP government was just as responsible, and I did cover that government.
And we were building transit and social housing, and I get it. People have concerns about the way that government operated. I wasn't there at the time, but I can say that there was
It wasn't all Bob Ray's fault, let's put it that way.
There was a commitment to infrastructure, which I think was important for a lot of municipalities.
Let me just turn our minds for a second to Hydro One. You know, kind of the genie's out of the bottle on that.
Well, we'll see.
Well, yeah, we'll see. I mean, where are you going to get the cash to put that genie back in the bottle?
Our plan is actually on the internet. We put it out publicly right away because it's actually quite a detailed plan. And you can go on the internet and find it on our website. It's very clear that the opportunity to buy back Hydro One with the dividends that the province is still able to receive is the way to do it. And we've laid that out in terms of how long that will take, based on the amount of the share price at the time we form government. And so the plan is there, the plan on getting rid of time of use pricing to give people a break, the plan on making sure that we have delivery charges that are fair and equal across the province, no matter whether you're in a large city or a small community. All of those things are on the internet. And look, it can be done.
I don't believe everything on the internet.
I'm sorry?
I don't believe everything on the internet, by the way. Many of the problems, financial difficulties that the municipalities face is a government that brings down regulations, new legislations, and passes all the costs for implementing these onto the municipalities. What would you do to see that changes? Because, you know, I'm talking about little regulation. Let's say a new regulation comes out for environment matters, and it gets passed down to such and such municipality, and they bear the cost of implementing that regulation. What would you do?
Well, I mean, I think the most important thing is to acknowledge that it's going to be a cost. I mean, you can't put your head in the sand and pretend that these kinds of decisions don't have an impact on municipalities. And so the most important thing is to be upfront about it and to try to find ways to relieve municipalities of the financial burden, either on that particular regulation, as you described, or through a relief in some other way. I mean, that's why I said what I said in my remarks. I don't believe in cutting and privatizing and downloading. I know that the municipal order of government has the least capacity to raise revenue, and that it's not progressive. Taxation at the municipal level is not progressive. And so I understand that. And I believe that the provincial government needs to be a true partner in solving those issues.
Do you see the difference between property tax and a retail tax?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's all consumption taxes, you mean? Right?
Yeah, consumer taxes.
Well, and again, I mean, one of the things that we've said is we're not interested in anything that's not progressive in terms of taxation. And so, yeah, I mean, there are differences, but when you look at property taxes, I mean, people, first of all, they pay property taxes on their after-tax income. So they're paying property taxes out of income that's already been taxed, right? So that's a burden on them. But it's also gotten and nothing to do with their ability to pay. So as you, for example, go through your working career and you're paying your property taxes, and then all of a sudden you retire, and then your retirement income is flat, and you don't get increases to your pension, your ability to pay those property taxes is reduced because the taxes go up and your income stays flat. And that's what a lot of folks have been telling me about in these last couple of days and have told me about in the past, is that they're really concerned about, we have an aging population, lots of northern communities particularly have a lot of senior citizens that choose to live in the north, in the beautiful communities in the north, but there's a squeeze around their ability to pay increasing property taxes.
Do you think the time's come to wrestle down the cost of fire and police?
Well, look, I mean, there's no doubt that police and fire are the, two of the most high price tag
In some cases,
services,
50%.
So high price services at the municipal level. I do know that there's been some requests specifically around arbitration, for example. That's not something that we think is and people who've met with the NDP know that this is the case, something that we think is able to be dealt with, frankly. But I do think that the process of bargaining with those folks is important. And when you ask people, do you want to have a fire department that's there for you when you need them, people will say yes. I mean, yes, they're expensive services, but they're also services that the public respects and wants to see provided in their communities.
But isn't arbitration part of the problem?
Well, again, I mean, that's what some of the folks in the room, I'm sure, believe. But I don't believe that you should be asking an arbitrator how to prioritize your budget. I mean, I see it the opposite way. People are saying, well, arbitrators should talk to municipalities or should look at these arbitration cases as whether or not municipalities have the ability to pay. But the bottom line is, then you're saying to the arbitrator that the arbitrator decides, what other priorities the municipality should have. And I think that's why you need to bargain those deals at the bargaining table and have the ability to make the decision at the municipal level.
Let's just get back for a moment, back to the 1%. I'm still intrigued about this. You've just missed it out of hand, right?
We don't believe that people at this point in time are able to afford even more
But
costs.
they're able to afford more property taxes.
Well, again, I mean, I don't believe that. That's why we're trying to do the work.
But the money's got to come from somewhere.
Well, again, and that's why we're working really hard to identify for these good folks here from municipalities how it is that we're going to try to.
But we're talking, $2.5 billion that would new money that would come in, earmarked specific for infrastructure, and you're saying, well, we're thinking about it, maybe, or we've got some other things in hand, but this is something concrete. I mean, these folks have gathered together. They don't all agree on it, of course, but they put a plan together, and nobody seems to be, it's an election year, I understand that, but they're not giving it serious thought.
Well, I mean, again, I think that when we look at how do we pay for the services that people need, whether it's at the municipal level or the provincial level of government, we have to look at what are the progressive ways to get taxes to pay for those things, and that's why things like you talked about sales taxes. Sales taxes are not a progressive tax because people who are of low income have to pay those sales taxes as well, even though their income doesn't give them the ability to pay at the same level as people who are high income. So sales taxes are not a progressive form of taxation. Income taxes are a progressive form of taxation. That's something that we believe is a progressive form of taxation, which is why we think that the provincial government needs to take responsibility for some of these programs that have been downloaded by the Conservatives 20 years ago and that are still sitting on the municipal tax base.
So are you proposing that income taxes should be increased then?
Well, I mean, again, we've actually looked at a number of things in some of our previous platforms. We've talked about some of the opportunities that might exist in that regard. Again, we don't have that plan put together, but I think that the most important principle is that people should be paying based on their ability to pay. Look, there was an article I was just reading in the paper this morning that says that lower income Ontarians are losing even more ground. Higher income Ontarians are doing better, and lower income families are doing worse. Now, we all talk about the gap between the rich and the poor, the gap between those at the top, those and those at the bottom. And we know now that since the year 2000, that gap is not only widening, but the relative position of the lowest income families is worse, and the relative position of the highest income families is better. I don't think that that's the way we're going to get to a more equal and just society in the province of Ontario. And I believe that everybody should be able to have a decent quality of life in this province. It's a province with a great amount of opportunity and a great amount of bounty. And we need to make sure that we're putting policies together that actually help people make a good life here.
So if I understand, increasing income taxes is not going to be on your platform this time?
You're not getting my platform out of me, Richard. It's not going to happen.
Well, but it has in the past. You've proposed.
We've proposed a number of things. In fact, when and again, the folks here who might be here from chambers of commerce will know this. Back when in the minority parliament, we're the people that told the McGuinty government to stop reducing the corporate tax rate. I mean, they had the plan to take the tax rate down to 10% from 14 or 14.5 at the time. We got them to stop reducing it even further, and I think that was a victory. That was a victory, because we needed those revenues to provide public services. And you know what? I've asked the Chamber of Commerce to give me the, because their discussion was, recently I had with them was, well, if you're not reducing corporate taxes, the corporate sector doesn't have the opportunity to use that tax room to then, make productivity investments. So I said, well, great, show me the evidence that the reduction in taxes from 14% to 11.5 actually created all kinds of new productivity investment. Well, of course, we know that's not the case. There's all kinds of dead money in Ontario and in Canada across the country that is not being invested in productivity or invested in expansion. So the arguments that corporate tax reductions create all kinds of new investment is simply not true. But what it does do is help us provide a more equal society and provide the programs that we need, like education.
Okay, last question. We're just running out of seconds here. If you add up all the things you're proposing to help municipalities, what's it add up to?
Well, I don't have the list right now. I don't have everything together, but I do know that there is a significant impact. The other thing I do know, and I'm going to be straight up about this, is that there's lots of municipalities that don't have transit systems. So when we say we're going to take 50% of the operating of transit off of the backs of municipalities, I know that that's not going to impact some folks, some people in this room. I know that not all municipalities have, massive amounts of social housing stock. So in some cases, that's not going to help. But what I also know is that when municipalities are saying, we're strapped, we can't afford to repair a bridge or to replace a bridge or to fix a culvert. I mean, I've met with municipalities that have told me their entire capital budget for 10 years is going to be eaten up because of one bridge that they have to replace in the middle of town. And their tax base is shrinking. So these are municipalities that are not like Toronto or Hamilton, where there's an increase or an influx of people, which is increasing their opportunity for taxation, but quite the opposite, where they're actually losing their tax base. And so these are municipalities that we can't simply ignore, because I don't believe that we should have a province where literally everybody lives in a big urban center. I think it's great that we have small towns, small communities, townships. That's the fabric of our province, and we have to keep that fabric strong.
And on that note, we're done.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.